Tammy Davis had a gorgeous home. I went out and visited him, the landscaping, the shrubbery, and the trees. See, I come from Philadelphia, and I lived in row houses. We never saw that, you know, shrubbery and trees. So if ever, the good Lord willing, I ever become a star and move to California, I'm going to get a home with lots of trees, because I realize now that a house without a tree ain't fit for a dog. In his last days, Joey Bishop finally revealed the dark truth about the Rat Pack. The million-dollar offers he turned down, and the shocking reason he was erased from Hollywood history. This is the story America's favorite comedy group tried to hide. Joey Bishop was born Joseph Abraham Gottlieb on February 3, 1918, in the Bronx, New York. He was the youngest of 5 children in a Jewish immigrant family. His father, Jacob, worked as a bicycle repairman, and his mother, Anna, took care of the home. Life was simple but tough. When Joey was 3 months old, his family moved to South Philadelphia, the city that became the backdrop for his childhood and shaped the person he would become. Joey grew up surrounded by Italian and Jewish communities, where humor was a way of life. Even as a kid, he had a natural gift for making people laugh. He started with small things. He imitated famous actors like Edward G. Robinson and Jimmy Durante. He learned tap dance and picked up instruments like the mandolin and banjo. Performing came easily to him, but school did not. He struggled to keep up in class, and by the time he was 18, he decided to drop out. His family needed money, and he had to work. His father's bicycle repair shop barely kept them afloat. Joey took on different jobs to help out, but his mind was always on something bigger. He saw how laughter could bring people together. He made his classmates laugh by mimicking teachers. He watched people in his neighborhood and turned their quirks into jokes. Without realizing it, he was building the foundation for a career in comedy. Even with financial struggles, humor never left his home. His family encouraged his creativity. They saw how easily he could command attention. He wasn't loud or over the top. His humor was subtle, almost effortless. He had a way of delivering a joke with a straight face, making it even funnier. That style would later set him apart in the entertainment world. Joey wanted to take comedy seriously, but getting started wasn't easy. He entered amateur contests, looking for any chance to perform. In 1936, he won $3 in a local competition for imitating radio comics. It wasn't much, but it was enough to convince him that he had something special. His first real break came in vaudeville. He and his brother Maury formed a comedy act called the Bishop Trio. The name came from their driver, Glenn Bishop. Later, when other performers joined, they became the Bishop Brothers. They performed in small clubs and burlesque houses across Pennsylvania and New Jersey. These were tough places to perform. The crowds were rowdy, and the pay was low. Joey had to fight for attention, but that only made him better. He learned how to read a room. He adjusted his jokes depending on the crowd. If one routine didn't work, he moved on to another without missing a beat. His style was different from most comedians of the time. He didn't rely on slapstick or loud punchlines. His humor was sharp but quiet. Audiences loved that. The act didn't last forever. When World War II started, one of their members was drafted. Soon after, Joey was called to serve as well. In 1942, he joined the U.S. Army and became a sergeant in the Special Services. Even in the military, comedy stayed with him. He entertained troops and kept morale high. Performing for fellow soldiers gave him a new kind of confidence. After World War II, Joey Bishop came back to comedy with a new sense of purpose. Before the war, he had performed in a small act called the Bishop Brothers. It was a mix of music and comedy, but when his partners were drafted in 1941, he had to continue alone. He kept the stage name and pushed forward. relying on quick comebacks and a sharp sense of humor that would soon set him apart. When he left the military in 1945, he wasted no time getting back on stage. He started performing at small clubs like the Casablanca Roadhouse in New Jersey. The crowds were small, but he knew every show was a chance to improve. His comedy had a different style from the loud and wild humor that was popular at the time. Instead of big gestures or over-the-top punchlines, he kept things dry and subtle. He made fun of himself, found humor in everyday life, and spoke in a way that felt personal. It worked. In just a few years, he was performing in bigger places like Greenwich Village and the Latin Quarter in New York. He was making $11,000 a week, a huge amount for a young comedian in the late 1940s. At the same time, television was becoming the biggest stage for entertainers. Bishop knew this was his next step, so he took every chance he got. In 1950, he started appearing on variety shows, including The Ed Sullivan Show. This gave him national exposure, but his real break came when Frank Sinatra walked into a club and saw him perform. In 1952, Bishop was on stage at the Latin Quarter when Sinatra happened to be in the audience. Something about his timing and delivery caught Sinatra's attention. After the show, Bishop got an offer to open for him at Bill Miller's Riviera in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Soon after, he was performing at the Copacabana in New York. These were some of the biggest venues in the country. Sinatra wasn't just a star, he was a kingmaker. If he liked you, doors opened, and for Bishop, they did. People started calling him Sinatra's comic, but he wasn't just riding on Sinatra's fame, he had something different. Unlike other comedians, his humor was never mean or loud. He didn't insult people or rely on wild performances. Instead, he made fun of himself in a way that made audiences feel like they were in on the joke. One of his best tricks was how he spoke to the crowd. He called them folks, which made everything feel personal. He didn't just tell jokes, he shared stories. He talked about his childhood, always making it sound funnier than it probably was. One of his favorite lines was about how his family had been so poor that he had to use his cousin as a sled in the winter. It was simple, but it worked. People laughed because they saw something real in it. Bishop's ability to connect with an audience made him stand out in a time when comedy was full of big personalities. While others shouted or played wild characters, he stayed calm and confident. His career was only getting started, but he was already proving that he didn't need to be the loudest voice in the room to get the biggest laughs. Joey Bishop was the quiet force behind the Rat Pack, while Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. grabbed the spotlight. Bishop worked behind the scenes, shaping their humor and keeping the act sharp. He was the group's comedian, the one who balanced their larger-than-life personalities with dry, effortless wit. They called him the Frown Prince because of his serious expression, but his comedy was what made their performances unforgettable. His journey into the Rat Pack started in the early 1950s. Sinatra saw him perform at the Latin Quarter in Manhattan and was immediately impressed. Bishop had a way of delivering jokes that felt natural, never forced. Sinatra liked that, so he made Bishop his opening act, a move that changed Bishop's career forever. Before long, Bishop was a regular in Sinatra's world, performing in front of sold-out crowds and sharing the stage with Hollywood's biggest stars. By 1960, the Rat Pack was at its peak. They weren't just a group of entertainers, they were a cultural phenomenon. Their late-night shows at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas were legendary. Audiences packed the showroom, eager to see the mix of music, comedy, and unpredictable antics. What most people didn't know was that Bishop wrote much of the material. He crafted the jokes and banter that made the shows feel spontaneous. He had a talent for playing off each member's personality, making it seem like everything happened in the moment. But behind the scenes, he made sure it all ran smoothly. Despite his role in shaping the group's humor, Bishop often stayed in the background. Sinatra and Martin were the stars, the ones people came to see. Bishop didn't seem to mind. He was the steady presence, the one who kept things from going completely off the rails. When the jokes got too wild or the show started to lose focus, Bishop brought it back with a perfectly timed one-liner. His comedy gave the group structure, something that was easy to overlook but impossible to replace. His work with the Rat Pack went beyond the stage. He appeared in films like Ocean's 11 and Sergeant 3, where his comedic timing added to the group's chemistry. One of the biggest moments of his career came in 1961, when he hosted John F. Kennedy's inaugural gala. The Rat Pack had been strong supporters of Kennedy's campaign, and this event was a reflection of their influence. It wasn't just a performance, it was a moment in history. Bishop had the job of keeping the night moving, blending humor with the elegance of the occasion. He handled it flawlessly. When the Kennedys arrived, he looked at them and said, "I told you I'd get you a good seat." The crowd loved it. It was a small moment, but it showed why Bishop was so important. He could stand in front of the most powerful people in the country and make them laugh without trying too hard.